I'm Joey.T.Cartoon.P, and you're watching the Cartoon Editorial. This is a segment on the show where I talk about trends and news going on in animation. And you know what? Growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s wasn't all peaches and cream, because you know what we had? Disney sequels. Once in a while you get a decent Disney sequel to show up, but for the most part they're all reflective of the same quality. Low-grade animation, and none of that ambition that you have in the first films, even making you question what was so good about those movies. But thankfully, we're in a new era at Disney, which some are even calling a new Disney Renaissance, where things seem to be going a little bit better. What the hell? You know what? I gotta ask the question. Should Disney even be making sequels? It's not a matter of them stopping the production of these sequels, but whether the animated films are necessary for spawning sequels. Is it necessary to deprive us of fresh content over giving us the same characters in similar situations? Could there be any good reason to make sequels other than trying to formulate an easy way to milk off the previous film's success? It comes to no surprise that at the time I'm making this editorial, Disney announces a sequel to their animated hit Frozen. Now, why I say Disney in this video, I'm talking about Disney's in-house animation studio, and not their sister studios like Pixar. It seems like they have a better grasp of what makes a sequel work, for the most part. Prior to the modern Disney sequel, it was rare for the company to make follow-ups to their animated films. Hell, it was rare to have more than one animated film made once a year, sometimes causing years-long gaps between films based on their intensive productions. With the time and money it costs to make an animated film, we underestimate how efficient it is to make an animated film coming out of the innovation and experimentation from our predecessors. In some ways, because Disney was making a new film based on a different story, made each animated film feel special, having their own worlds, characters, and stories, while holding on to the traditional Disney formula. Now that we move ahead in time to the late 80s and into the early 90s, we have more competition and other studios making animated films, causing a change in the market. Now we move from having one animated film a year to 3 or 5 that can compete with Disney in the feature animation game. It's not a surprise that this is when we would see our first follow-up to a Disney animated film with The Rescuers Down Under. At this time, Katzenberg saw an opportunity with home video. Have another studio take our favorite stories and asking what happens after Happily Ever After, especially with a faster and cheaper mode to distribute the films for people's homes without waiting for the films they've seen already be released in theaters. Which comes to no surprise since this is the same guy whose practice involves workhorsing his animators to make 3 animated films a year regardless of whether or not they're good. Keep thinking about that while your Glendale campus begins building cobwebs and all those artists you had to lay off. Okay, I'm getting off topic. We start the DTV sequels with the lame and often maligned Return of Jafar. We start this strangeness by casting Dame Castellaneta as the genie since they couldn't get Robin Williams. While we're at it, let's have Iago sing 2 songs. And yeah, I'm aware that this movie spawned another sequel and a TV series. You could stop harassing me with emails telling me this redundant fact. With this film, it really set the tone of what would come out from these sequels. Cheaper quality, retreads of our favorite moments, and a predictable set of outcomes that even kids could see a mile away. Not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I also found it strange that with the more and more sequels we got, the quality of the feature Disney animated films began to falter, with the exception of their sister studios, so it came to a surprise that once Lasseter took reins as the company's CEO of animation that the films began to resemble quality work. So like I said when it came to the pre-Disney sequel days, having a Disney film come out felt pretty unique because there were their own stories. Why settle with just adapting fairy tales when we could make films out of Peter Pan or modern tales? Why have animals talk in every film when we can focus on the human ones? It gave the films a sense of variety while holding on to a similar formula that really established the Disney brand, much the same way Tim Burton or Wes Anderson gives their films different stories with a similar style. Bambi was made by Disney, but the world of Bambi is not the same as the world of Dumbo, or Snow White, or Peter Pan. That, and the films felt like completed stories with their structure, climax, and resolutions. Self-contained adventures that don't need more explaining. When Snow White and the prince head to the castle in the sunset, there's no need to see where their lives would be like afterwards. When the genie is freed from the lamp and Jafar is thwarted by Aladdin, there's no need to see the consequences. The characters have reached their goals and came through their conflicts. Or at least for me they did. I was always the odd man out when people were looking forward to see a sequel to Wreck-It Ralph. Some people thought it would be great if we got more licensed characters from other popular arcade games make an appearance. It wasn't about seeing Bowser or Zangief from Street Fighter share the same screen, but mostly about Ralph and Vanellope getting respect from their peers. That was their conflict that we the audience wanted to see them overcome. Now if they were to make a new movie, what's the point? What other conflict is needed or added characters will do to change this? But in some ways, there are ways to create new conflict without changing the original story or characters, which brings us to the double-edged sword of sequels. Once in a while, you do get a film that makes you challenge why you love the first film, in a good way. I can safely say that The Dark Knight was such an improvement to Batman Begins, I've almost forgotten the last time I've seen Batman Begins. And while we're on the subject of Disney sequels, the other side of this argument would often discuss the theatrically released sequel to The Rescuers. A film that many say is vastly superior to the original. It took advantage of better technology and how to have the characters like the Rescue Aid Society raise their risks and situation. Okay, so we never find out who that naked flasher is, but the less we know the better. And from all my bemoaning of sequels, I don't think giving Frozen a sequel is a bad idea. It's clear that the film they made was not a direct adaptation of The Snow Queen. They took a lot of liberties and practically made their own film with its own structure and characters. In some way, having another film where we can go back to these characters doesn't seem like a bad idea. This is Disney's Frozen, not Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen. There are other conflicts we can discover while not having to tell the same story from the first film. So I guess it's safe to say that the world won't be going to hell in a basket with the release of a Disney sequel. It may be a risk of how people view the original film or reputation of the studio, but it's probably just as risky as making an original film entirely. And while I would prefer Disney keep their identity to keep new animated features with different characters and stories, it wouldn't hurt to revisit a world with characters we've grown to like go through different stakes and situations. So my question today is going to be something you might want to think about for a bit. Could you think of a Disney sequel that feels appropriate to the story? Comment and let me know. And for years, there have been so many people asking me after my Return of Jafar review, what are my thoughts on Disney's King of Thieves? Which I'm going to address right now. Right here, in this very video. Aladdin and the King of Thieves is in fact